Welcome to the 15th common session of Sunoikis' Digital Classics 2016. Today we have guests from the University of Zagreb in Croatia. We have Professor Neven Jovanović, Petra Sostarić, and their collaborators Mario Benedict and Dunja Steverja. I apologize for my pronunciation, but I don't know Croatian. So today, with this common session, we will talk about translation alignment, and we have two connected common sessions because today we have our guest from Croatia, but next week we will have Professor Ferreira from Brazil, from the campus of Araraquara, and she will talk again about translation alignment and Treebanking. I want to thank both Professor Jovanović and Professor Ferreira because they have been participating in Sunoikis' Digital Classics since the beginning. They are contributing a lot to our program, and I have to say that especially last year, Professor Jovanović gave us many ideas for building our first syllabus. So, Neven, Petra, welcome to Sunoikis, and thank you for your contribution today. I think you can start.
Okay, so I think we have unmuted ourselves.
Yes.
Okay. Hello to everybody. Welcome from Zagreb. Just a few words about why we decided to do just the Treebanking, just the text alignment part. This is what we decided to build our course on. So Mario and Dunja and Petra and I, we have been experimenting with all the stages of going from the pages of an old book, which is in Latin, to the text that we can align. And this is what we want to share with you today, not the whole process, but the question, and we want to demonstrate what happens when you actually start using tools to manually align two texts. But these texts will be in different combinations. So I think we can start with our presentation, hopefully. Okay. Yes, dobro, sad samo stavi slide. Okay. I hope that you can see the slides now.
Yes, we can.
Great. So these slides are also there on the internet. You can find a link to the slides on the GitHub pages of Sunoikis. And what we will talk about today is text alignment. So the next slide tells you what just the verb align means, and why is it important? Why is it important in general language? Here, the most important idea is that to align means to connect something that is somehow related. Of course, you can align many things to many other things, but let's start with this. The next thing is we will present the plan of this lecture. We are now about in the middle of an introduction. Then Dunja and Mario and Petra and myself will present a demonstration. We will try to align several sentences live, to do it in front of you and to start a discussion. What is happening, what are the problems, what are the questions that arise when we start actually doing this. We will also, instead of a conclusion, we will try to have a general discussion on what happens, what are the good things of this procedure, what are the slightly less good things, what are we missing at the moment. And then we will invite you to join us and to align a sentence or any number of sentences as homework. So the question that we begin with is what is alignment when we want to align texts. The term alignment comes from the field of translation, and it appeared when people started using computers when they started using computers for translation. As you can see, there are some tools which build on the very simple fact that every translator has a lot of texts in his or her computer that have already been made, that have already been done. So apart from having a knowledge of language in their minds, the translators also have the things that they have already done. And there are commercial firms which want to help people translate more, translate faster, translate more accurately by building computing tools for them. They are trying to sell their tools quite hard, so they some of their offers sound quite enticing. When you have a lot of translation, then our tools will help you have even more translation, that is, earn money by remembering or by using a computer to remember. Now, this applies mostly to a technical translation, to translations of laws, of regulations, of instructions for use, all those things that have to be done quite quickly and that people are willing to pay for. In classical philology, can you go back just please? In classical philology, we don't use this type of translation very often. We actually get paid rarely for translating something. But we also have our type of aligned translations, and they are called parallel translations. Perhaps a lot of people from the English-speaking world will immediately think about the Loibs, which have Latin or Greek text on one side and an English translation on the other side. And these texts are somehow aligned. Roughly, one paragraph of original text corresponds to one paragraph of the translation. Of course, the German world, which is quite close to Croatia in its educational system, has its own equivalent of Loib. It is called Reclams Universal Bibliothek, and these are those simple and relatively cheap editions that students can use and that can fit in your pocket. So, if we want to align translations, there are people who will publish books where the translations are already aligned. They are already in parallel. So what is different in using a computing tool to align something? First, I think it is important that we are doing this ourselves. So we are not taking something that somebody else has prepared for us. Of course, we are taking an existing translation, but we will be trying to make the connections ourselves. Second, since this is computing, we will be trying to connect everything. We will be trying to connect as many words from the original text with as many words in the translation as possible. We are hoping that this will lead us to a deeper understanding, because we will also be pausing to reflect. So we don't just want to click on everything that we see. We want to take a step back and to think about what we are doing. The idea is that this will show us a new perspective on a text. There is also the fact that people are using translations in the classroom, even when they are studying Greek or Latin. there are also some programs where people are using just only the translations. And the question is, can we, I mean, usually when I, when my students have to take the exam, we pretend that they didn't read the read translations, and I want to test only their actual knowledge of Latin and Greek. But I can also use their knowledge, their understanding of the relationship between text and translation to test their understanding of language. There's another thing. When we know something, this knowledge, unless we tell it to somebody, this knowledge remains in our minds. It isn't connected to anything. There are those people who prepare translations, they're authors of translations, and we can all use their knowledge. But we don't have means to share knowledge of all of us, for example, of all of us in Sunoikisis all around the world. So how can we share everything that we have learned? How can we leave a trace of everything that we have learned? And I think that this is the great thing with the computers. They enable us to do something, to do our task, and at the same time to note down that we have done this. Once we have done this, it can become a part of a larger collection. And we will also have the chance in this lecture to show at the end how one of these collections can look like. Okay, so now perhaps you think, how do we actually do this? And this is why we have Sunoikisis. We are lucky to have a tool which is actually ready to be used. This tool is called Perseids. It has been developed mainly by the Perseus project and by the Tufts University, but it is out there on the internet and everybody can use this. You can see the address here. And we will be doing this in a few minutes. We will be going to our Perseids accounts and we will be taking the sentences that we have prepared there and we will be aligning them using the Perseids platform. How do you do this? It's quite simple. You just select the tab, the link, New Text Alignment, which you will in a few minutes see on the screen when we start working. Of course, there are other things that we have to think about, but you will start to see these problems when we actually start doing this. So it is time for demonstrations now, and now I will turn this over to Petra and ask her to start because she will be showing us how to translate Greek with Latin. Petra?
Hello. Before you actually see me align live, I'll tell you something about the author of the Latin translations I'm working with, and it's Andreas Divus Justinopolitanus, or Andrea Divo. He probably lived in the 16th century in the town of Justinopolis, or Capodistria, or Koper, in today's Slovenia. I say he probably lived because some philologists, like for example, Ahuvia Heijn, argue that he did not even exist, that the name Andreas Divus is only a construct, but whatever the case, his translations do still exist. He translated not only Homer, but also Theocritus and Aristophanes, and his translation of Homer seems to have been extremely popular in the 16th century. Before Divus appeared, the most famous, the most popular translation was the one by Vala, we'll also see today, but when Divus appeared, Vala just faded into the background. The main reason for Divos' popularity was the fact that it was a word-for-word translation. It was really verbatim, and you could follow the word order, but okay, I'll get to that a bit later. And now a pop cultural news flash. Andrea Divo is famous at least to the Anglo-Saxon audience, because he was mentioned quite ironically by Ezra Pound in his first canto.
I mean, only in Croatia is Ezra Pound part of pop culture. This is perhaps not so in Britain, but here it is.
High culture. Okay, here you can see the first page of his Latin translation, ad verbum translata, and as you'll see in a few moments, it really was ad verbum.
Petra, can I interrupt you to ask you one thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because so I see the date. So as far as I see, this translation was published in Venice in 1537, something like that. Is it correct? So
Yes.
I think this is very interesting because I would like to mention this. So now in Venice, there are various activities and also exhibitions because they are celebrating 500 years after the death of Aldo Manuzio, who started in Venice to print classical sources, Greek and Latin, and so he experimented a lot with well, how to print Greek and Latin fonts and how to produce these printed editions. And I can mention, so this is, Aldo Manuzio of course started these big important cultural activities in Venice, and I think that this translation is part of this activities. Is a bit later because it's 1537, but Manuzio started in 1470, something like that, to publish.
Monica, you are quite right. Divo's translation was keyed to Manuzio's Greek text. So
Okay.
it was meant to be used in parallel, even though they were two separate books. But the idea is that you could actually compare word by word the text that was printed by Manuzio and see this in Latin that was prepared by Divus. And I would like to mention that this is where we started the course. This is where Dunya and Mario and us as well had to transcribe the words by Divus from this edition. And the edition is available thanks to the Bayerische Staatsbibliothek. So we really have a lot of countries and a lot of connection going on here at the moment.
Okay, so thank you. This is excellent also because we have to remember that in the 15th and in the 16th century, they started experimenting with Greek and Latin fonts, with translation for printed editions, but basically they had the same problems, or at least similar problems, that we have nowadays for digital editions. Of course, we're using another medium, so that's why I wanted to mention this, also this relation, and thank you for explaining me that. So sorry for this interruption, but it was very interesting.
Thank you for this remark. Okay, now I've opened the Perseus platform and I'm clicking on my sentence to align it. And here you can see the Greek text on the left side, the Latin text on the right side. So what you see is just a bunch of words, and I'll show you how to align them.
But Petra, could you read the text just to get going?
Yeah, I'll just read the first few lines, which I'll align later. Ton Hector neikesen idon aisrois epesin, dispari eidos ariste ginaimanes eperopeuta ait opheles ago nos temenai agamos tapolestre. And in Latin it's Hunc autem Hector convitiabatur videns turpibus verbis male paris specie optime et effeminate deceptor. Utinam deberes non generatus esse et sine nuptisque perise. So how do we align? You just click on one word and you find the corresponding word in the Latin text. So ton is hunc. The particle de is autem. Hector, as you can guess, is Hector. So you just click on the left, click on the right, and they are aligned. And Well, it just goes on like this, and as you can see, when you hover over the words, you can see which one on the left is aligned with which word on the right. And the alignment in the case of Andreas Divus just goes on like this. He doesn't change much the word order. So for those of you who do not know Latin, I'll just tell you that his Latin is a bit unnatural. It doesn't sound like Cicero, for example. It doesn't sound like Livy. He is even sometimes breaking the basic rules of Latin syntax. And I'd just like to make a few remarks on his word choice. And some linguistically speaking, we should notice that he is translating idon by videns, and those are both participles of the verbs which mean to see, but videns is a continuous tense. It means seeing, so it's not actually the same as the aorist participle idon, having seen, but he just didn't have this tense in Latin at all, so he made do with what he had. And another linguistical problem, I think, are compounds. So the compound dispari is actually male paris. Dispari means something like you bad paris.
This is actually a word play because that's a not paris, paris or bad, yeah.
So with this bad paris, or whatever you like to call him, I'll show you how to align two words with one. You just click on two words on the right side, and then when you hover over this part, you see it's male paris. Well, sometimes he did not want to make his translation any longer. So when translating the compound ginaimanes, which actually means who is crazy about women, womanizer, he chooses the Latin word effeminata, and it's not exactly the same. Effeminatus means like effeminate, as you can guess. So that's not really the same as a womanizer and somebody who is all about women chasing them. Actually, quite the contrary.
Petra, do we know, did Divus understand the word, or did he just see that it has something to do with women, so he bluffed? What do we know about his knowledge of Greek? Is it good, or?
Well, I think it was pretty good. And I think his Latin, his own Latin, when he wrote his own text, was actually much better than this. Just by seeing this Latin text, you'd think he was a kind of a poor student of Latin with only a basic knowledge. But actually, when he writes introductions to his translations, he is quite eloquent and classical in style. And as for the Greek, I think he was well, he knew as much as he could have known at that time. It was a 16th century, so he didn't have access to all the things we have, and he didn't have all the editions of Homer we have. So sometimes, but in this particular case, I think he just wanted to have something that is similar and not to make the translation too long. Oh, that's my guess. Maybe we could discuss this later.
We will remember this. Yes.
Well,
what is the very important thing that we have to do after we have done?
So after you have a line that is clicked on the left, on the right, and once you have aligned two words, you have to save your sentence, otherwise it will all be lost.
Oh, it won't be lost. The program will remind you that you didn't. But how do we go back once we have done the job?
Then you go to the sentence list, and here you see it once again.
Okay, so we are back in the perceived, but we are not in your account yet.
And then we
are just on the sentence, and we go to home.
Home.
Yeah. Okay, and here we can select a sentence that we will ask Mario now to go over there. And can you, Petra, just open the sentence?
I think it's already here somewhere.
Okay. Just show us the sentence.
Okay, you just click.
Okay, and now now Mario, will you please take
yes.
command
Our young
and
colleague.
explain to us what you will be doing. That's good.
Okay. So. So I'll be aligning some Latin and French text. The Latin text is the translation of Homer's Iliad. It was made by Andreas Deus. Petra has just said a few things about him, and so I will say something more about the French translation. The French translation was made by Eugène Lasserre in 1955. You can easily find it by clicking on this link here. It's a Belgian site called Hodoi Elektronikai, and now I've choose one paragraph, a paragraph from the third book, and now I'll be aligning. Quando.
Will you just read it out loud?
Yes, I'll read first. Quando montis summitatibus notus effudit nebulam, pastoribus nequo congratam, furi autem noctem meliorem, tantum aliquis videt quantum in lapide nitit. Sic horum sub pedibus pulvis motus est turbulentus venientium, valde eniceleriter per transierunt campum. And the French text, quand sur le sommet des montagnes, le nôtre verse le brouillard détesté des bergers, le plus propice au voleur que la nuit, on n'y voit pas plus loin qu'un jet de pierre. Ainsi, sous les pieds des guerriers s'élevait un épais nuage de poussière. Tandis qu'ils allaient, et très vite, ils traversaient la plaine.
So actually what you will be doing now is you will be connected to translations.
Yes.
So these texts have only the original in common, but the translators didn't know about one about the other. Yes. So they have been done independently, and Mario will be exploring whether these texts can be aligned. Okay, so please.
Yes. So we could align quando with quand, and then the adverbial phrase montis summitatibus with sur le sommet des montagnes. We should make it twice. Notus corresponds to le note. Effudit to verse, and nebulam to le brouillard. Pastoribus des bergers.
Okay, can you just stop a little bit? I would like to ask you a few things. Why did you connect in French? Why did you connect both the article and the noun, like in le note with notus?
Because in Latin there are no cases, so we should align.
No articles.
In French there are no cases, so we should align and the article and the noun.
You want to say so the article is somehow part of the noun.
Yes.
But what do you think would it be possible not to align the article? Do you think that this would be that somebody could find an explanation, an argument about this? And I ask the others as well, so you can also say what you think.
I think we should align and the article.
Why?
No, because it is a part of the noun.
In French.
In French.
In French.
Well, I agree with Mario, and I have another question for him. We have montis summitatibus, and you align both words with 5 words in the French, but could we maybe align smaller units?
Yes, we could align montis with the montagne and summitatibus with sur les sommets.
Okay, so just for educational purposes, could you could you show us how to unalign if we want to change something? Because this can also be done, and I forgot to show that one in my.
I sorry for interrupting you again. So if you click on Show Interlinear Text on the right, you can see there is a small box. You can, okay, here, if you click there, you can see, okay, this is useful because you can see the actual alignment. Because as Neven and Petra were mentioning, so that's one of the big issues of translation alignment. What do we want to align? Do we want to align everything? Do we align also articles, etc.? And here, with this visualization, you can really see, so you can switch from this, and you can see what you are aligning. So just...
yes, great. Thank you for reminding us about this function. Yeah. But Mario, you wanted to say something about this. You wanted to do actually, yes. Unalign. Did you do this?
Sure.
So we just click back in a way, but I think that you started by clicking on the in the right hand pane.
No. I think možda was.
Yeah.
Sve do kraja. No.
Ah, you wanted to use the undo for this. Yeah, this is also another way to do this. That's quite clever. Did you undo this?
I should undo.
But perhaps if we don't want to undo, we can just click again, but click on the right hand side. Yeah. Yes, like this. Yeah. Great. It's even faster than using the undo. Okay. Usually, people are saying that it is hard to connect French translations to Latin. Is this, what do you think, is this part hard to connect?
Well, surprisingly, it wasn't so hard because the translation is pretty loose. Yes, there are some places where we can have different opinions. Like,
can you show us one of these places?
Yes,
like,
there are tantum aliquis videt, quantum ilapidet mitit, should be aligned with on y voit pas plus loin qu'un jet de pierre. And there, and this means that we cannot see more than a stone's throw. So we could take it as a phrase and align tantum, this whole, the whole Latin sentence with the whole French sentence. Or we could just cut it into the smaller pieces, like tantum aliquis videt, and we could align it with on y voit pas plus loin, and quantum ilapide mitit with qu'un jet de pierre.
So what we have here is that the translator has changed part of speech. What is in Latin, it is mitit, so this is a verb, and it was translated by ange, so it was translated by a noun.
Yes.
And this is what can confuse people. There is obviously this idea, this action is somewhere around here, but the part of speech has been changed. Also, lapidem is in accusative case, but the Pierre wouldn't be accusative. What would French grammar actually say about this?
If I remember correctly, it should be le complément de nous.
Yeah, don't look at me. I don't know French. Okay. So this is where we where a translation starts to be freer and freer, and it can be. Will this be enough? Or this is what you wanted to show us? Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Mario. Can you just save and close and go out? Okay. Okay. And now we will ask Dunya to come over to the computer and to tell us what she will be aligning.
Hello. So I will be aligning a paragraph from also from Davis's translation with a paragraph from the translation by Alexander Pope. Alexander Pope was an 18th century English poet. He was best known for his satirical verse, his use of the heroic couplet, and his translations of Homer. His translation of the Iliad was published in 6 volumes between 1715 and 1720. And I will now read the text. Excuse me. If it loads. There we go. So, Hunc postam cognovit bellicosus Menelaus, venientem ante turbam longe transeuntem, sicutque leo gavisus est magno in corpore incidens, inveniens vel cervum cornutum, vel silvestrem capram, esuriens valde eninque devoret, siquidem ipsum impellant veloces canes tenerique juvenes. Sic gavisus est Menelaus Alexandrum divinum oculis videns. Dixit enim punire erantem. Statim autem ex curibus cum armis saltavit ad terram. In the English, him Menelaus loved of Mars espies, with heart elated and with joyful eyes. So joys a lion if the branching deer or mountain goat his bulky prize appear. In vain the youth suppose the mastiff's bay, the lordly savage rends the panting prey. Thus fond of vengeance, with a furious bound, in clanging arms he leaps upon the ground from his high chariot.
So thank you for helping us hear the verses, because what gets lost in this aligning frame is that this is poetry and that these are actually verses here.
Yes.
Okay, so can you show us where would you start with writing?
So it's always the easiest to start with the subject, and the subject here is Menelaus, which corresponds to Menelaus on the right. Then we have the predicate, which is cognovit, and espies in English.
So these are not actually equivalents. What would you say?
Well, cognovit is in a past tense. It's perfect.
Yes, but cognovit, it means how would you translate it literally into English?
He knew.
Or he recognized.
He recognized,
so
yeah.
He recognized. And espies, it's more like he saw,
Yeah.
but in a very poetic
Yeah, it's
way.
very poetic.
And cognovit, it is actually not especially poetic. Huh?
No.
Okay, so go on.
That's okay. And then we have the object, Hunc, that aligns with him. And there's also, excuse me, and we also have bellicosus, which means fond of war. And as we know, Mars is the god of war, so that aligns with love of Mars. Like that. And that's the first line.
So this is again something that Pope has added, because Mars is here only implied.
Yes.
Mars is a figure of speech for war. Yeah?
Yes. Well, he needed it for rhyme and rhythm and all those
or
poetic
he needed it, or we can say that he was trained. He was used to doing this, to turning words around, finding a way for them to rhyme, which is quite nice,
Sure.
actually, when you think of it. Okay, please.
So when aligning Latin with English, it's important to note that Latin doesn't have articles, but English does, just like with French, as my colleague Mario showed you. So if you wanted to align, let's say, canes, you would have, well, I personally would align both the noun and the article with it, like this. And the same with juvenes. So not just use, but the use. because in English the article is very much a part of the noun as well. You would also do this with possessive determiners. So for instance, here you have curibus, and you would align this not just with high chariot, but with his high chariot, because that's also part of that phrase.
Yes, and when we translate from Latin into English, or for that matter, for that fact into Croatian, we often have to say explicitly that it was his chariot that he stepped from, but it is somehow more implied in Latin.
Yes.
And in Greek, as we can see.
And also, it's important to note that Latin is a null-subject language, which means that it expresses person, number, and gender agreement with the referent of the verb. So the subject doesn't have to be explicitly stated, whereas in English it does. So for instance, if we were to align saltavit, we would have to align it not just with leaps, but with he leaps, because otherwise you would have an ungrammatical utterance in English. And as far as Pope's translation goes, there's an interesting thing happening with impellant here. So impellant has two subjects, canis and Juvenis, and they're coordinated. But in Pope's translation, he separated that in two thoughts. So the youths do something, and the mastiffs do something else. But oppose and bay are practically synonyms, because, I don't know if you know, but to bay means to howl loudly. So
yes, but the youths, they don't scream, they just stand against something.
Sure.
That's not exactly synonyms.
Well, they're not. They're species synonyms.
Yeah, so everybody does appropriate to their nature, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But so you could align with both oppose and bay with impellant here.
Mm-hmm. And now another professor in me wants to say, look at Pope, how he creates a parallelism. So he says the youth oppose, the mastiffs bay. This is almost like what we are seeing in Latin when we have our Latin stylistics course, when everything has to be in pairs and everything has to be, in a way, aligned in a Latin sentence. And this is what is being done in English, but not in Greek, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it for me.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
When you say Juvenes, they are in Latin. They have an adjective, an attribute. Which
Yes.
What is this?
Tenerife.
Tenerife. Yes. Where is it in the translation?
Oh, it's not there.
Mm-hmm. So when we align everything, we will have a few words left, which will still be read.
Yes.
Yes. So this will be like veloces. We don't have anything. They are just mastiffs, so
Yes.
they don't have any attribute. And we don't have the teneri. What would teneri mean?
Gentle.
Yes, something like gentle or tender or something like this. And so we can even say that Pope made a quid pro quo. So he left something out,
Yes.
but he put in something of his own. So he added the verbs, but left out the attributes.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Dunya. And for our last demonstration, I will be doing this after I save everything and go to the sentence list. Now I think we already have a sentence here. Just a moment. Let me find this. It's not here. It's also not here. Yes, this is it. So what I will be doing now is I will try to align two Latin translations of the same Homeric text. One of the translations was done by Lorenzo Valla, and we have already heard about him today. He was writing about, let's say, almost 100 years before Andreas Dius, because Valla's translation was done in 1444, and Dius was published in 1537. But Valla was writing a real Latin as it should be written. So his text is here in the left-hand pane, and it says, "At vero, Alexander viso Menelao obvium veniente, subito timore perculsus, represso relatoque pede ad suos sese recipiebat." And Dius, who translates verbatim, translates Homer like this: "Hunc postquam cognovit Alexander divinus in prima atie apparentem, percussum est carum cor, retro autem sociorum ingentem secessit mortem fugiens." Now, where do we start? I think I will do what Dunya has said, and I will start by aligning the names, because they are quite easy. They are also easy for my students to align, and for the high school students as well. So Alexander obviously has an equivalent. But now the question is there a Menelaus? So Valla says viso Menelao, but Menelaus is actually here in Divus sentence. I think he is behind this hunc, behind this accusative. So we could try to connect Menelao with hunc. Then, since hunc is accusative, we ask what is the predicate. The predicate is cognovit, and then we can see that cognovit has an equivalent on the left-hand side. So I will connect viso with cognovit. Now the similar thing happens that Mario has also seen. We have viso, which is a participle in Valla, but it is cognovit. It is a finite form in Divus. So the part of speech has again been changed. At vero, I don't know. I don't think that I can do anything with this. But there is something else. Usually when we teach Latin, we are taught that ablative absolute can stand for a temporal sentence. So I think that we can also connect, we can select this viso, and we can connect this with postquam as well, because viso Menelao means postquam cognovit Alexander. But Alexander, here he is just Alexander. Okay, just a moment. Let me save this. Okay, now divinus is obviously not expressed in Lorenzo Valla, and Petra can tell you that Valla, that people in the Renaissance, they were not as interested in Homeric formula. Is it right, Petra?
Yes, that's right. And Valla was especially interested in Homer as a historic source. Valla had a patron, Alfonso V of Aragon, and this Alfonso wanted to know more about Greek history, and he thought, oh, Homer, that's an excellent source for knowing Greek history. Hey, Valla, why don't you translate it? And then Valla did translate with significant help from his student, Francesco Grifolini, who actually did more than half of the
So, as we today think of Homer as an oral poet, or a poet between orality and writing, people in the Renaissance saw a different Homer. And this is why Valla felt no problems in leaving out divinus, which is a Homeric attribute with Alexander. Anyway, what was happening with Menelaus? Divus says, in prima atie apparentem. I don't think, yes, it has something that can be an equivalent. So we can connect. I don't want to connect postquam. I want to go here. Just a moment. Okay. So we can say that obvium veniente is an equivalent of in prima facie apparentem, because he was coming towards Alexander, so he was obviously appearing in the first battle row. Okay, I have to do this in that way because at some point I have changed the order and I have started connecting. I have started aligning the right side with the left side. What was happening then? Then the unfortunate Paris, he was afraid. In Vala, he was subito timore percursus, and in Dius and in Homer, percussum est carum cor. We can see that percussus has a clear equivalent here. Again, what is participle in Vala is a finite form in Dius, but note that Homer says carum cor percussum est. So it was not Paris himself, it was his heart. But in Vala, it is Paris himself, so this being who was subito timore percussus. Of course, now timore, now I cannot say. What would you do? Would you connect timore with anything here on the right hand side? What do you think? Because I think that percussum est means his heart was struck, was stricken, or whatever. But percussus timore, so he was struck by fear.
Yes, in the translation by Dios, he is not struck by anything particular.
Yeah.
So maybe I just leave
So he just feels a blow, but we don't know what blow. So how come that Vala writes timore? What do you think, Mario? We cannot say why anybody does anything, but can you make a guess?
Maybe because he guessed he was afraid.
He also was asking himself, if something strikes your heart, what is this that strikes your heart? It won't be love when he sees Menelaus. It will obviously be fear. So this is what happens. Okay. I think I can stop now. We could, of course, go on as we do usually in Zagreb, but we only have an hour, so we will go back to our story. And now is the time. Now is the time to discuss what we have just been doing. Peter, can you show us now on screen, please? Just a moment. So.
Okay, just keep talking.
So, no, we are in no hurry, I think. Okay. So now we have aligned something, and we are thinking about how useful is aligning for us. We all agree, of course, that it's useful. Mario and Dunya agree because they have to. But is there something that you are missing? Okay, first things first. What would you say? When you usually use translations, do you do something like this when you are reading a book with parallel translation?
Not really, no.
But when you are reading a translation, at which point do you go from Latin to a translation? If it is a Lloyd, if it is a parallel translation. When do you consult the translation?
Usually we don't know what in Latin said.
Okay, yeah, I also think so. When we get stuck in a word, So at this point, when we are stuck, what are our eyes doing on the right-hand side?
We are looking how the Latin word is translated in some other language.
And we are trying to orientate. We are trying to see where we are, which sentence is the equivalent of this, and now we are looking for the point where we got stuck in Latin. So we can say that we are doing aligning only with our eyes, and we are not clicking on anything, even though, judging by the books that I have seen, people sometimes do this aligning, and they even leave a mark of this aligning. So this procedure can be similar, but how is it different? What would you say, Dunya? How is this aligning different from what we are doing when we are reading?
Well, this aligning we do for the sake of aligning, and we are looking for translations for a completely different reason, to understand the text, rather than to connect to different texts.
Yes, but when you go to an exam, you don't always have to show only your understanding of the text. You also have to show something else. Is it so? Isn't it so? What is it that we, as your professors, want to see?
Understanding of language.
Yeah, so that you can not only understand what is the text about, but what is this precise word, which form is it, and what is it doing in the sentence, and why is this important for somebody who studies Latin?
You have to know grammar.
What for?
That's what languages are about.
What do you think?
You have to know the grammar.
Yeah?
You have to know the grammar.
Because you have to.
Yeah.
Petra, what do you think? You just compare it so that we can also see it.
Well, I also think it's important to. Am I answering this as a professor or as a student?
You can choose whatever role you want.
Well, when I ask my students to translate the text, I expect them to understand the sentence structure, okay, the grammar, as you said, and I'm extremely disappointed if I notice that what they are saying is quite similar to an existing published translation. So, okay, maybe this is beside the point.
No. This is. But why is it? Why is it not? Why is it a bad thing to memorize a translation?
Well, because it shows that the student did not understand the text properly, and he cannot recreate the meaning in his mind again. But he's relying too much on something he learned or memorized by heart, maybe unconsciously, and.
In a way, we can say that we are only thinking about one side of the text. A text can have many sides. We have seen this today. When you give the Iliad to Pope, he will make one text of it. When you give it to Divus, he will make another text. And when you give it to Lorenzo Valla, you will get a third text. And when we think about the text, if we are thinking like as philologists, we want to think of all these forms, and we want to be able to understand all these forms. And when we concentrate just on the Croatian version, then we don't think about the Greek version. But what is more important, we don't think about this interplay between Greek and Croatian, about this that gets changed. What would you say, Mario? I'm thinking about your phrase, like on jet de pierre. Can it be said? Can it be expressed in French by a verb?
By a verb.
Yes. So they were. It says in Latin that they were as far as you can throw a stone. Could you say a sentence like this in French?
I guess we could, but it would sound unnatural to
Mhm.
French.
And I think this is important because we also what we want to train people to do is when they look at the sentence in the original language, so that they don't translate just word for word, but that they translate, as we say, idiomatically, something that sounds good in the target language. And we do it, of course, mostly for Croatian, but you too, as students of English and French, will have to know what is idiomatic in English and French as well. And you know that this is the greatest problem for a second language speaker to feel these idioms, to feel these idiomatic phrases. Is there something that so this can be, I think we can say that this can be a useful exercise for us to think differently about the text. But is there something that we are missing here, that we are not doing when we are clicking on these words?
Yeah, there are no strict rules what we have to align with something.
Yes, and we have seen this. You just decided to align a phrase with a phrase, which is quite all right. And of course, I wanted to be an advocatus diaboli, and I didn't want even to align the article with this. And I think that it was you who said this. But why are we doing this? And this is an important question because. If we have a goal, if we are clear about why we want to do this, then it will be clearer to us which rule do we want to apply or how do we want to formulate the rules. Of course, it's always simple to just say, let the professor say what will the rules be, and then the professor gives you a list, and we grade you according to whether you have honored all the rules or not. But still, somebody, perhaps a student, can ask themselves, some people would ask, okay, but why are we doing this? So why are we doing text aligning? You can ask Petra this, and you can answer as a professor.
Yes, because the students would say, well, because you told us to do it.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Well, why I do it with my students is because I know they will be doing the traditional reading in every other course, so I just wanted to think of something that might be challenging for them, although Divus is not really challenging.
For some people, he can be, yes.
Even my students who don't study Latin but have some basic knowledge can align Divus with Homer. Well, I'm interested in expanding their vocabulary in both languages, and I think they focus more on the meaning of the translation and the original text, and sometimes they have difficulties with expressing themselves when translating. So maybe they could. When they think about how other translators did their translations, maybe they could get some sort of guidance or inspiration for their own translations. Maybe not from Divus, but more successful translators.
I think that we can also explain to people listening to this in Sunoikisis that Petra and I have already done a relatively large project which tried to align. So we were working together with our students, not with Dunya and Mario, but with the students for our last year course. We tried to align about 130 sentences of Greek and Latin with Croatian. And here we also had this problem, what are the rules and why we are doing this. And we were also thinking about this, whether to align on the level of phrase or to align on the level of individual words. But there it was clear why we were doing this. We were doing this because we wanted to have a corpus of aligned texts. So we wanted to have a collection of texts. And if I think we have time enough, I could show you just briefly what can be done once we don't have just few sentences, but once we have like 100 sentences. Okay.
And thank you for this, because this is very important. We have to mention that we have seen in this common session the interface for aligning, but of course we can export not only the display but XML files where we have the alignment between words. So this is important for building a corpus. Then rules, you mentioned rules. How many rules we want? Because of course when aligning text we have big issues, and I think that we can agree or disagree on the rules. Of course, one of the big issues of translation alignment is to have guidelines. So what kind of guidelines we want, so that's why we need a lot of data, and your work is fundamental, because aligning text we can build a list of issues, questions and problems, and the goal is to have guidelines. But what kind of guidelines, how many rules do we want, etc., as you know better than me, of course.
Yes, the question is what do we actually want to do? First, we want to help us all understand Greek and Latin better, but we also want to, once we have done this, once we have finished the course, we want to show the students that their work doesn't go away, that it can be used to produce further knowledge, because all of your individual sentences now go together, and we can export them, as Monica has said. We can take them out from Perseus, and then we can transform them once they are in a very formalized digital form. We can transform them actually in any shape we want, and I will show you here how I transformed our corpus, which was built last year. It turned out that it is simpler to analyze these sentences if we transform them not into XML, as it is when you export it from Perseus, but into a format which is called RDF. The idea of RDF is basically that everything is like a sentence. You have a subject, you have a predicate, and you have an object. So here you can see that that there is a Greek word which is legeis, and it has a predicate. Legeis is direct translation of. So actually it should say has a direct translation, but it's not important. Is direct translation of a word with the number of 10331. So this 10333. Sorry, I didn't show you the right thing. So this is direct translation of something named 10496. Now this is not clear to us what it means. And it is not supposed to, because this is what we will show to the computer. So computer knows this address, and at that address the computer will find a Croatian word. And in this way, building these very simple sentences, which are much simpler than the Latin and Greek sentences that we have to understand, we can analyze a very, very large collection of text. You will also notice in this example that something is direct translation and something is loose translation. How did I come to this conclusion? So this is a very, very rough hypothesis. If a word has two equivalents in the target language, so this word, I say, is loose translation. But if a word has just one equivalent, so then it is a direct translation. Now, what you have shown us today will immediately refute my hypothesis, because how was it, Petra? Ginaimanes. So Ginaimanes is definitely not a direct translation. The relationship. So this model has to be explored further, but this is something that we can start from, and then we can pose questions using this RDF. We can pose questions to the whole collection of aligned text. How would a question look like? So we can say, of course, in a programmatic language, we can say, for example, show me all Croatian translations of the Greek word kai. Now, kai, you would say, is a very simple word because it means and. Yes, our students of Latin know Greek as well. But it turns out that when you actually query the corpus, you will see, so here are the results, you will see that in Croatian kai is also simple, it is E. So E appears 59 times, but there are some other conjunctions like a and te, so this is again expected, not as frequent, not as reoccurring. So there's a 6 times and 4 times. There are some interesting cases where a conjunction is translated by a comma, and it is translated even by a dot, which you can see here. But there are also some cases when the Greek kai is translated, and now I will translate the Croatian words. It is translated by grandfather differently between how and the armchair. Now, obviously, kai cannot mean all those things, but we have discovered here a situation when there are several words on the Greek side connected to several words on the Croatian side. So we have what in a computer database language would be a many-to-many relationship. We have located a phrase like Mario has done today when he connected the J de Pierre with all those Latin words, and here we can start from this. Now we can write a more complex query saying, okay, show me just the phrases in this corpus. So once we have any number of sentences, let's say more than 10, when we have 100 sentences or even 130, we can start doing interesting things using the computer.
Neven, sorry, I have a question. If you can go back to the slide where you have, I think, the JSON output with the loose translation.
This one. That one. Yes.
This is interesting because I see that you are using the SOS ontology, which is the ontology of the Sharing Ancient Wisdom project. This is very interesting, I think, because today I have seen your example. So basically, so you have showed well, different translations of Homer. So I can say reuses of Homer, because now today we have focused on translation alignment, but what we have seen is aligning text, and we align text for various reasons. For translation, but we can align text in the same language to see reuse, and I think that a translation is a reuse, and in fact every translation in the end is an interpretation, a sort of reuse of a text into another language. And I think that this example where we have this terms, is direct translation of, is loose translation of, this is part of this rich ontology SOS, which is an ontology developed for, well, it's a big project made in London, and so they work not only with translation alignment but also with reuse. This is important because this work on translation is part of a bigger frame where we align text, and as you know, we align text for many reasons, for critical editions, for translations, and so on. So that's why we have to think our work in the digital humanities, but also in traditional classics, as part of a bigger frame. Philology. This is philology, and this is digital philology. So thank you very much for this example, because this is something I'm using for text reuse. But this is part of the same discussion.
Okay, Monica, I didn't want to go into this because
Yes, I know. Sorry.
there are many things to explain. But let's just repeat to our friends around the world that there was a project called Sharing Ancient Wisdom, and one of the important tasks of this project was to think about all the ways that two texts can be related to each other, because they were actually researching a collection of sentences which were taken out from one text because they were very, let's say, clever sentences. They were ancient wisdom. So you can find these sentences all around in unexpected places. And what I have been doing, I have taken this set of the predefined relationship that the SOURCE project used, and I have actually misused this, because it wasn't meant to be used at the level of a single word. But I misused it because I was simply doing an experiment, and I was looking for, it's called an ontology, but this is not a philosophical term in computer science. It's simply says that these are predefined relationships that subjects and objects can have. So I was looking for an ontology for translation, and I wasn't able to find one. So I took, so Monica, I took what was close.
You're right, but you're right, Neven, yes.
What was most understandable to me.
And I'm using the same for text reuse, yes, so.
Because one of the idea is that we want also to reuse the ontologies, not only texts. Yeah. Can we perhaps ask other people, do they have questions or something like this? And then we will go on to say something about homework, if it's okay. Yeah?
I don't know if there are questions. We have people in the Hangout. We are 3 minutes late, for my fault, I have to say, because I have interrupted you, but the discussion is very, very interesting. And so, yeah, so I think, Neven,
you are on time, yes?
Yeah, no, but if you want, you can go on. If you want to mention the homework, please, you can do that.
Yeah, okay, I will just mention the homework, and then we will say goodbye. So I would like to invite everybody who is listening to this lecture to try out a text alignment for yourself. You can take any sentence, any pair of sentences that you want. You can choose Greek or Latin, align it with any other language. You can take an existing translation, or you can make one yourself. But try to use Perseids for this. You will be learning how Perseids works. And when you are done, then I would ask you to submit this sentence to the board, which is called Zagreb Homer 2015. This is the board that we used last year. And there, Dunja and Mario and Petra and me, we will be reviewing your sentences, and we will get in touch back with you. We will say what we think about the work that you have done, so we can all discuss it. This will be a chance for you not only to do some alignment, but to get acquainted with Perseids as a system for peer review. There are instructions on submitting your work, and you can find these instructions on a link to these instructions. You can find them on Sunoikis's GitHub page, on Sunoikis's GitHub. And I think that this is all from us. Thank you very much, people, for going on with this, and thank you for being brave and speaking to all those unknown friends. And thank you, Monica, for making this all happen.
Well, thank you all, because this was a great common session, and this is exactly what we are looking for. Not only for the topic, as you know, translation alignment is a big topic. At the beginning, Neven, you said we are going to talk just about translation alignment. Well, we need to talk about translation alignment because it's a big topic, and we need data. So I'm very happy to see your work, and I know you have an important collection for Latin. Thank you for the discussion, for the live discussion, because this is another goal of Sunoikis, is to have people. So we don't want lectures online, but we want a discussion. So it was perfect. So your discussion was very, very interesting. And as you said, Neven, line everything in the GitHub page, precise instructions, links. And definitely in Perseus we have different boards, so when you submit something you have to select the right board. And so thank you for your contribution, but also for your help. And so if people can submit, and so you can help people and review their work. So we will meet next Wednesday with Anise from Brazil. So we will go on with translation alignment, and I think also some Treebanking, and we will see Portuguese, because I know that Anise is working with Greek and Portuguese. Yes, she says yes in the chat. And so thank you, and good night, and see you next week. Okay, bye, bye, bye.